return to work? I guess particularly the high-rise towers, what are they going to need to implement to ensure that that all stays safe?
For towers or for offices? Or
Office towers in particular, but offices more generally.
Yeah, there's obviously been lots of work over many months now to really embed some of the COVID-safe principles in those places. It does relate to hygiene, it does relate to the cleaning that occurs in those settings. But more broadly, we've prompted everyone to make sure that if they're unwell, they're going for testing. We've enabled that to take place and for those results to turn around really quickly. In the office space, again, there's been guidance. It's been supported by WorkSafe. The COVID-safe principles apply in the workplace equally. They're not new to most of us. It does relate to, again, excluding anyone who's unwell, enabling them to stay home when they're unwell, making sure that hand hygiene is supported as much as possible, soap and water or alcohol-based hand gel, and to minimise those opportunities for transmission. So still trying to keep your distance, masks will be in place. So really ensuring that all of those basic principles are adhered to.
And what about public transport, which is obviously going to be the other high risk factor?
Yeah, it's not going to be a huge crush with a 25% return. So we'll have an opportunity to again embed some of those practices and the oversight of them. People will need to try and maximise the distance with others who are not part of their normal residence to the extent possible. That'll be pretty easy at the 25% level. After that point in time, that's when masks play a significant role. Again, the cleaning that's been enhanced on public transport will need to be in place, and people will need to be aware that once they've touched surfaces, held that handrail, they should also be going through hand hygiene as they get off public transport. So whether you carry a bottle of alcohol-based hand gel or go to a bathroom and wash your hands, they're simple but important things.
And would you like to see officers stagger their start times for workers, so not everybody's starting at 9 a.m?
Yeah, I think there'll be further guidance on that from Department of Transport and PTV, but it'll be a pretty sensible measure to try and reduce that peak crush on public transport, but we're not going to hit that for some time yet.
What about communal working spaces? So someone, for example, rents out a little office space or a desk, and then somebody else from another industry also does that as well. So it's not an office per se, but it's individual people renting out desks.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what the guidance will say. There'll be specific stuff from Department of Jobs, Precincts and Regions on that, and again supported by WorkSafe. But the general principles apply. You do have an OC health and safety obligation as an employer, and so if there are people who are coming into that space, no matter how it's used, you have to support it with those COVID-safe principles in place.
Are you confident we're going to get to elimination now?
So elimination may or may not be the right word. I think we're talking about no community transmission. I'm pretty confident we're there now. We haven't gotten to that epidemiological threshold of 28 days yet. I'm pretty confident we're going to get to that 28 days. That said, incursions happen. We've seen a big outbreak in South Australia. It could have been much bigger if it hadn't been picked up at the early stage that it has been. That will be an ongoing risk until there's really substantial rollout of vaccine across the world. And that is some months away, at least 6 months. And we're not going to get full coverage of vaccination for all of our international arrivals for an even longer period of time. So we just have to be mindful of these things that we're going to have in place for distancing, use of masks, hand hygiene, cough etiquette. They are our insurance policy for any incursion that may happen into the future.
When you think of those scenarios, it's a long time since we had this amount of freedom. What has changed in terms of thresholds for taking action and so on since we were here last time? I mean, we've got lived experience and knowing a lot more about how this can happen quickly. Does that mean actions will happen more quickly to suppress and so on? Well,
clearly we've learnt through this whole process that going early and going very robustly is the best measure. When you have weeks and weeks of no transmission, no new cases, you will have every opportunity to see where that first case might arise, and we will wrap a public health response around that immediately, and it will be very robust. The stuff that you saw at the tail end of Wave 2 with the contact tracing, contacts of contacts, and quarantining really hundreds of people for every single case that you have, which is where South Australia's at, 4,500 people quarantined with 25 current cases. It may not be dissimilar. You know, if there are a number of primary contacts and contacts of those contacts, they will all go into quarantine, and again, the capacity that's been built in the pathology system to turn around results within 24 hours will all be part and parcel of it. The contact tracing improvements and the timeliness of that follow-up will also mean that we'll have about 24 hours, not from time of notification to the department to getting close contacts into quarantine, but from time of testing to getting close contacts into quarantine. That is the standard that we're at the moment, and that's what I would expect if we see anything into the future.
So the last time we were anywhere near like this, perhaps not even this far, we had kind of a slower postcode rollout of things. So this would be much more accelerated than that.
Yeah, this is a different situation to that time between first wave and second wave. We hadn't gotten to a point where it looked like there was no community transmission, where we had an opportunity to see a new case arise and it was obvious that it arose. We were still seeing the tail end of that first wave as cases started to pick up in the second wave. So the second wave, in a sense, was hidden in the tail end of that first wave. That made it difficult to see exactly what was happening. It actually was occurring in the same geographical area of Melbourne as well. So that was a challenge. It's much easier, it's much more straightforward to have days and days of no transmission, to then see if you've got a new incursion and then to just absolutely jump on it.
This one person, they've been an active case for a very long time now. Is that unusual? Obviously, without breaching their privacy,
Yeah,
is it unusual? Is it a different strain of the
No,
virus?
it's not a different strain. Every strain is different in the sense that you can get minor mutations, but there are no real new strains circulating around Australia. The prolonged shedding that some people get is pretty rare, but when you've had 20,000 cases in Victoria, it's not unusual that there might be some individuals who do have that prolonged shedding. It usually relates to some immune dysfunction. So whether you're suffering from a chronic illness that means your immune system isn't working properly, or you're on suppressant medication for your immune system, you can get that prolonged shedding. It's not known how long that might persist for, but I think clearly we're down to a single case now, and I wouldn't expect that it will go on forever.
Just on the wastewater testing, we've had a few instances now where it's come back with positive results. To my knowledge, it's never actually produced an actual positive result in the community. How accurate is it, and how helpful is it to us now?
We think it's accurate, but the issue is that people can continue to excrete the virus for some weeks after they've recovered. And so when we have a call out for people to get tested because we've detected it in sewage, we don't know if that's because there's a new case that's emerged who's active and infectious, or whether someone who has been a case and has recovered and is still 3 or 4 weeks from that recovery has moved into an area. So someone might have gone to Portland from Melbourne, might have gone to Benalla, might have gone from North Altona, where we've had cases recently, into Altona proper, picked up in the sewage, but those individuals have actually recovered. So the virus is being detected, but perhaps those individuals are no longer infectious, no longer symptomatic. And so when we're prompting people to get tested, they're saying, well, I'm not symptomatic. I had a cold a month ago, but I'm not in a category of someone with symptoms. And so we're not picking up people by virtue of that. But we're pretty confident in the test. So it's probably picking up genuine virus, but it may well be picking up people who've recovered some time ago.
Do you know how much outdoor transmission has been throughout the entire pandemic in Victoria?
We can't say definitively. We do know from some studies that the risk indoors is 18 times that of outdoors in terms of the ability to cause a cluster of cases. It's pretty unusual for outdoor outbreaks to occur. The Rose Garden at the White House is a famous example. There are some where there's been singing or shouting or some other exertion where, again, the risk of transmission can occur, but largely they're in enclosed spaces, more prolonged period of time, people in closer contact, and again with that singing, speaking, shouting, it increases the risk again.
Do you have any data, or have you been able to sort of quantify, outdoor transmission versus indoor transmission?
Not for our cases. Obviously, we can't definitively pin down the circumstances where someone might have picked up the virus. We've got very strong suspicions that, the vast majority of our transmission has been within households and within workplaces, so indoor settings. We don't have many examples of outdoor transmission, and where it has been picked up, where there's been people in contact outdoors, they've also been in contact indoors. So, family transmission might have occurred at a wedding, but it might have occurred later in an indoor setting, so it's pretty hard to tease out.
Is there any changes to choirs, especially in the lead up to Christmas?
The choir recommendations, I think, will still apply, but there won't be a public health direction limiting the numbers. But I can come back to you with the specifics of that.
Do you have any directions on dancing at weddings? Like, can people sing, dance?
I will have to take that on notice as well. Look, I think clearly nightclubs are seated only. That's because the exertion of dancing and again the closer movement that occurs is a higher risk of transmission. So the recommendations for weddings would certainly be not to have that as well. Again, whether it's written into public health directions, I can come back to you on.
Can I ask the Premier a few questions?
Sure.
Regarding the Australian Open, is there any updates, or when do you expect decisions for?
Question, please, just on weddings. The HHS authorised officer recently wrote to a wedding vendor saying dancing is not mentioned on official COVID information, therefore the venue can have dancing so long as it maintains adherence to its COVID safe plan, which is obviously contradictory to what you just mentioned.
Well, I said that...
seek to sort of clarify...
Yeah, our recommendation is really that it is a higher risk activity. It's not prohibited. There are a number of things that are not prohibited through public health directions, but we still wouldn't recommend them taking place. Some people might find that they can dance with a mask. Very few people on the dance floor keep a 1.5 metre distance. That is less of an issue, obviously, than an indoor dance venue with a number of people who are in close proximity.
Do you anticipate by the start of next year we won't have to wear masks inside as well?
I think we'll change the settings again for indoors, but it is our insurance policy for whatever new cases might emerge. You don't want to be in a situation where you suddenly find that hundreds of people have been exposed and people weren't wearing masks in an indoor setting. We do need to see ourselves get to this 28-day threshold, but it is an insurance policy that is most useful, obviously, when it's in place before the fact. If you're introducing it after the fact, when transmission has occurred, it's going to have less value. And through our whole epidemic, the introduction of masks probably decreased transmission by about a quarter. So it's played a significant role. That has meant, I don't know exactly, but it has meant that we've gotten to this point in time 2 or 3 weeks earlier than we might have otherwise. So that's a real win for us. There are some examples in the United States, North and South Dakota. They've basically been anti-mask at a legislative level for some months. They've got the highest rates of transmission in the world at the moment. Absolutely overwhelmed health systems. So it plays a really significant role, both in terms of managing transmission when it's very active, but also in that preventive role. If a case is introduced into a setting and people are wearing masks, you really decrease the risk of transmission occurring.
We'll just finish by again thanking the public health team for all the work that goes.